So let's start off with the Dan Chen as we normally do. Dan Chen, Ming Men of a level. Breathing the Dan Chen, pulling it in towards the Ming Men, so the Ming Men bulges back, and then pulling the Ming Men towards the Dan Chen. My arms are indicating the movement. They're not generating the movement. The movement's generated in my belly and back. Belly contracting, which pulls the belly in and pulls the hands towards each other. And then my lower back strengthens. Physically and mentally, I need to be together enough so that these two actions can act as a pair. Which means they overlap slightly. And then just settling into riding horse. So for the belt of the waist to act as a unit, so for the action in the belly and the action in the back to be bound up as one machine, they both need to be working so that there's a certain tension there all the time in both phases. It just, the tension shifts and moves very fluidly. We want the same thing in the legs. So if I want to use my legs in that sort of springy dynamic way that I'm using this, then the legs straightening function and its bending function have to be both very active. And the problem with the legs is they're normally just pushing all the time. They're straightening all the time to keep us up. So it's the hamstrings again that need to be activated so that the legs can behave like this sort of twisty, rubbery, every movement, every direction is resisted a little bit by like an elastic tension. What we tend to do when we work on the belly and the back with this breathing exercise, we're getting all the action here, but we tend to use the legs simply as a support for that. So my legs create like a platform upon which I'm working the belly and the back. So I could actually be sitting down on my cushion and doing the same exercise here. Now, what we want to do now is get it much more into the legs. And the difficult phase is the phase where I pull in the belly, because I want to get that now activated, not in the belly muscles, but in the hamstrings. So what I do, I tighten the hamstrings in order to pull me down towards the ground. And I allow that action to draw my tail and sacrum down into the legs. And then when I do the back activating part, really I'm just activating the quads and pushing up and opening up and then bending the legs again from the hamstrings if you can. So you're pulling yourself down. And that sucks you down towards the knees, your lower back, your spine, your sacrum and tail. And then, now, so it's much more difficult because the legs are a lot more active. They're not just passively supporting an action. They're now creating the action. My hamstrings are sucking my tail and sacrum down into them. And that means that I have to pull my head over, otherwise I'll fall backwards, because basically my spine is trying to become horizontal. So we tend to give our attention to the upper body, the head and the arms. Here, we're just trying to bring it down into the legs. So it's my legs bending here that I'm with. My head coming over is as minimal as possible. And then just back to riding horse. So that should really work the legs. And now let's just try a bit of the opening up to the earth. So you can think of the dantian now as being the place where the blood splits, the flow, the life flow splits at the dantian into each leg. Feel each leg as independent of the other. So you need a bit of a wriggle in the waist as you go down so that they're not completely together. So the blood from the heart splits down each leg, flows down, branching into these capillaries, and then it returns through the veins until it joins together just behind the artery point. The lower you get, the more branches. This is and then into riding horse. Feel this Dantian Mingmen complex connected to the legs and very much fed by the legs. My legs are like the roots that extend out of the Dantian. And then let's just bring our attention to the head point. So the heart and the head are similar in that they're like the opposite of the Dantian. The Dantian is like a holding point, an anchor. So it relies on being together. And these 2 points are just opening up all the time. They should be. What tends to happen if we think to ourselves, then the head point sort of closes down and becomes heavy. Thoughts are a bit like material objects. They have mass and they bear down. The heart ends up being crushed between the earth and your heavy head. So this has to quieten down and just open up, like it would be if you were, let's say you climbed a mountain, you got to the top and there's this amazing view that just takes your breath away. You'd be speechless. There'd be nothing going on up here. And so that's the feeling. It's like you're just awestruck. So when the heart is relieved of the weight of your thoughts, then the heart will open out as well, and energy will emanate and mingle. So the energy that we work with in Tai Chi it's much more like chi, or a life force, an energy that brings life, but not just organic life. So a mountain can have life, a stream can have life. Human objects tend not to have them. I mean, in the old days, an old beloved tool that's passed from generation to generation would gather energy to it through its respectful use. Whereas nowadays, everything has to be pristine. Everything has to not contain energy for people to desire it. It needs to have a shiny surface. So the human world is now replete with objects that have no energy. They have no good energy. They have no life energy. They're full of bad energy, energy that works against the life energy. I need to pull this down to the ground. So my hamstrings, I have to learn how to activate my hamstrings. And this has to be able to just lift and open, almost like someone's sawn the top of your cranium off, and there's this glow emanating from the top of your head. And then this just opens, it just softens and will start reaching out. And then you inhabit not a world of things and a world of thoughts, but a world of feelings. So a world of the imagination, a real world. Okay, now let's try the heaven exercise, so the one that's the complement of the earth exercise. So now I'm just concentrating on the blood that's coming out of the top of the heart and branches down the arms and reaches up towards the sky. And then the movement reverses and it comes down the arms through the veins, back into the heart and then out again. Again, getting a slight wriggle going in the waist so that these two arms aren't quite together. Almost like there's a force that doesn't want them to come together. Our mind wants them to be together because our mind loves symmetry and simplicity. Whereas energetically, they don't want to combine and just become one. They want to stay separate. And as you reach up, just be careful that you don't extend the legs too much. You don't want to come out of the legs. Legs are still sinking into the ground. So as I reach up with my hands, I want to feel the legs doing the same. Something is reaching down from my feet and into the ground. So my legs are not simply supporting the movement of my upper body, they're generating it. So something is squeezing up from my legs in order to get the arms to go up. And then my hamstrings are sucking here to pull the hands down. So ostensibly it's from the belly and the lower back, but they very much come from the legs. Lower back coming from the quads tightening and legs straightening. Hamstrings and lower belly connect. And then back to riding palms. And now using the legs to turn. So straightening one leg in order to push the hip around, and then bending that leg to pull me back to the front, and then straightening the other leg. The difficulty is getting the leg straight. If you get the leg really straight, then it will just arch up into the upper body and make you lean back. So just go with that. And then when you pull with the leg, it bends you the other way. So this is squeezing up like this. and then this is contracting, and that's pulling back, straightening or leaning back, and then contracting. So the straightening of one leg pushes me into bow and arrow posture, and then the bending of that leg brings me back to riding horse. So when I'm in bow and arrow, I'm like a pulled bow. And then if I release the arrow, I will just slip back to riding horse. Feel the twist in the arm and the leg. Twisting one way for the straightening, twisting the other way for the bending. And now the same thing, but just a bit more quickly, like it would be if you were walking relatively slowly. So straightening, bending, straightening, bending. I want to feel, it's just the action of the two legs. I'm not really interested in the turns so much. I'm interested in the action of the legs, the breathing of the legs, and the pumping of the legs. This alternate pumping. Feel the action of the legs extending up into the torso. So your torso is going through all these sort of contortions, these writhings, but it's purely from the legs interacting with the ground and interacting with each other. And then just let the arms go, but the same thing in the legs if you can. One straightening, bending, one straightening, bending. So this movement, this turning is coming from the legs. It's not simply your legs supporting the turning of your upper body. The legs are the generator. And then just soften it into this exercise of just opening up to either side. It's the same thing, just different speed really. And so that produces different mood, different energy. I open, something in me extends outwards, and then I capture and bring it back in. You think of a big tentacle or a big arm coming out of your heart, reaching out and pulling something in. So if we want to open up to energy, the energy that John was interested in, this sort of life force energy, spirit. So this life force energy, it's like spirit that's sort of slowed down a bit. Spirit is just very quick and sparky, but it's very much from the heart. So we really have to activate the heart if we want to work with this energy. So for that, I have to really lift the head, stop thinking, allow the head to really lighten and open up to the heavens. And then the burden of my worries having lifted, and my heart will free. And eventually it will pluck up enough courage to come out of its hiding place and mingle. So the cost really of technological advancement is the diminishment of the heart, especially electrical technology. It's basically got bad energy. It's too much. You can tell it with your mobile phone. After you've been on it 5 minutes, your hand starts tingling. I have to shake my hand. It's nasty. So this is the opposite of that. Something that's up, these tentacles are just reaching out of my heart and just caressing everything in my environment. And then they very much affect what I'm surrounded by. It's the opposite of like the scientific mind that tries to remain as detached as possible so that it doesn't affect the outcome of the experiment. Here, we're trying to completely overwhelm the experiment with our own heart, our own good energy. Okay, and then back. So when I first moved to Israel, I received a letter from John. One of the things he said, the thing that sticks in my mind is, you have to work on your heart. And he said, you have a fledgling heart. And it's like the perfect word, really. Think of the fledgling in the nest, the little bird that's growing feathers, but it can't yet fly. That's what our hearts are like. They don't really have the courage to just reach out. And partly, we've sort of lost the imagination. In order to allow that to happen, you have to be able to imagine. You have to be able to see energy in some sort of way. You have to have a mind that's free of cares and woes, free of worries. And you have to believe that that world of energy and the imagination exists, and that you are very much part of it and very much responsible for it. Now let's just do the 2 circles. Friday morning, 3:30 in the morning, I was meditating. It's the only quiet time of day. And suddenly there was a big bang in my kitchen, which is this room through here. And then this cat screaming. And I rushed in, and the screaming was coming from just outside my window. So I opened the window and this cat scrambled in. It was the cat from the people above me, and it had fallen out of the window. It must have fallen asleep on the windowsill and then clung onto my window ledge with one claw, which was all bloody because it sort of pulled the nails out, the claws out. But she came in, she sort of scrambled in and just lay on top of my washing machine. And she was so frightened. And so you know what they're like, frightened cats, they're just really low to the ground and every movement is really slow. And the eyes were enormous, like these saucers. And every time I tried to stroke her, she would hiss at me. Pure fear embodied So that's really how we want to move in the Tai Chi. You know, when John used to do his form and he'd just be so sunk and he'd often be shaking and it looked like almost like the tremble of fear. So let's just try it and just really slow and awake, like you've just had a real fright that's woken you up. And you daren't come up from the ground. So every movement is taking you deeper into your legs. It's got the feeling of prowling. The feeling is it never becomes habitual. Every millimeter that oozes out of you is full with readiness. And then just keep it going, but just see it as the figure of eight in around the feet or around the waist. It's exactly the same exercise. I'm just seeing it differently. And I want to be using the legs in the same way that I was when I was doing the turning. So one leg straightening and then bending to pull me back. The straightening turns me and the bending pulls me back down towards the ground. And now just bring the feet up a bit. And basically the same thing, but just a bit more modest. And feel the figure of eight in the feet. Feel it taking you from the heel around the outside edge, little toe through to the big toe. The big toe presses down, which squeezes it into the other heel, and so on. And then stepping with it. So just keep it going. Try not to break. So stay sunk. What basically that requires is not simply that your leg is bent, but that your Ming Men is pushing back. So your lower spine feels as though it's bulging backwards rather than coming forwards, which it normally does. And then swapping round. Okay, good. Remember, John used to say that when you're properly sunk and you're properly in the Dan Chen, then it will feel as though the Dan Chen is trying to lift upwards like this. And John, when he was working with me, he'd often look like he was crying because his eyes would be tearing. And he said it was simply the energy coming from here was smarting his eyes. And so for that, to get this feeling of a lift from here, you really need to allow your sacrum and your tail to sink down into the legs. And that's difficult. It's difficult on the legs. They tend to hurt more, but psychologically it's difficult. We're just not used to giving ourselves to the earth. We're used to springing from the earth all the time. We're used to taking energy from the earth or using this rebound type force. But actually giving ourselves to the earth is it's a bit like willing to die. Okay, let's just try some of this one. So the toes are always in contact with the ground, but the heels are sort of dancing, but in slow motion. One heel goes down, the other one comes up. I want to do it just very, very slowly so I can feel the strain. Quite quickly, the legs should really start shaking, especially because of all the work we've done prior to this. And I try and have my attention with the heel that's going down so that I get sucked into the leg and underneath the heel that's coming up. feel the figure of 8 in the foot. So I'm going around the toes as the heel comes up, and then as the heel goes back down, I'm going around the heel. So there's a figure of 8 inside each foot. And I want to feel the two minds, the mind that is in the toes of one foot, so the lifting hand here, and the mind that's in the descending heel of the other foot. Two very different minds, both important, and the one we tend to ignore is the one that's going down into the heel. So that's the one we need to privilege in order to right the balance. And that's the root. It's just your foot going down and into the ground. It's not just going down onto the ground. It's penetrating. It goes down slowly so that as it goes down, I can really cut under. You just get the figure of 8 in the arms as well. And then you're just figure of 8ing, but everything is figure of 8ing. And I want to just get as much movement into my torso as possible. So if the torso is the twine of your two sides, all twisted and bound, then I just want to get a little bit of separation in there. Get the two sides of my body really working against each other. So one's coming up, the other one's going down. And then just let it subside. It's still there, especially this figure of 8 in the feet. And this gentle turning, twisting. So I want to feel the turning of my waist very much as a twisting, like the two ends of the line are moving in opposite directions, which is producing this coiled tightness here. And then just sinking down into my feet to get the hands to come up. And just feel the heart. It's like plumes of smoke are sort of coming out and just connecting.